Everyone loves to say INFJs are the rarest personality type, the mystics, the geniuses. But here's the hidden truth. What makes INFJs so sharp also makes them suffer. Their intelligence doesn't just elevate them, it isolates them, and sometimes even destroys their peace of mind. So today, let's dive into the 10 dark sides of INFJ intelligence and how this so-called superpower can backfire in the most painful ways. Stick with me until the end, because number 9 and 10 might change how you see INFJs forever. And if you're an INFJ, let me know in the comments which of these dark sides feels a little too real for you. Let's dive right in. Alright, first thing first. Overthinking to the point of paralysis. INFJs don't just think they overthink. Their minds are like supercomputers running endless simulations of every possible outcome before they make a single move. On the surface, that sounds like wisdom. Who wouldn't want to be 10 steps ahead, right? But here's the catch. When your brain never stops calculating, you never stop hesitating. Imagine being invited to something as simple as a party. A typical person might say yes or no in seconds. But for an INFJ, that decision can turn into a full-blown mental chess game. They'll imagine every possible conversation, analyze the energy of the room, predict how drained they'll feel after, and even wonder if declining might secretly upset the host. The result is stay frozen between choices, not because they don't care, but because they've seen too many possibilities to act on just one. This constant analysis often leaves them paralyzed in situations where speed and spontaneity are actually rewarded. While others are already living, laughing, or learning from mistakes, the INFJ is still stuck running simulations in their head. And the tragedy is that by the time they finally make a choice, the moment may have already passed. They miss opportunities, and worse, they carry the heavy guilt of wondering what could have been. Psychologists sometimes call this analysis paralysis, and it's one of the most common ways intelligence backfires. The very gift that makes INFJs insightful, cautious, and wise also robs them of simple joys. Their mind is so busy building a perfect future that they often forget to live in the present. And this constant cycle of overthinking doesn't just waste time, it eats away at their confidence. Because when you hesitate too long, you start to feel like you're incapable of deciding at all. This is one of the darkest sides of INFJ intelligence. The ability to see every possibility ends up making it impossible to move forward. And that's not brilliance, it's torment disguised as wisdom. And next up, seeing motives too clearly. One of the INFJ's most haunting abilities is their talent for seeing through people. While others might take words at face value, INFJs are scanning the subtle cues, the hesitation in someone's voice, the tiny flicker in their eyes, the energy behind their actions. They don't just hear what you say, they sense why you said it. On paper, that sounds like a superpower. But in practice, it can feel more like a curse, because once you start noticing hidden motives, you can't turn that skill off. Compliments stop feeling genuine, kindness feels loaded with unspoken expectations, and even small gestures start to look suspicious. Instead of enjoying relationships as they are, INFJs find themselves digging for the real reason behind everything. The painful irony is that INFJs desperately crave deep, authentic connections. Yet the very intelligence that helps them read people so accurately is the same thing that makes those connections hard to trust. When you constantly see through masks, you start to wonder if anyone is ever truly sincere, if everyone is just acting. And that doubt builds walls, not bridges. Psychologically, this is linked to what some call hypermentalization, the tendency to overanalyze others' intentions beyond what reality can confirm. For most people, ignorance can be bliss. But for INFJs, the ability to see too much often strips away that bliss entirely. They can end up isolating themselves, not because they don't want love or friendship, but because they can't silence the voice in their mind saying this isn't real, they don't mean it. And so, their intelligence backfires in the cruelest way by making them distrust the very things they long for the most. INFJs can read people like open books, but sometimes that book is so raw and revealing that it hurts to keep reading. Third on the list, carrying the weight of the world. INFJs are known as the protectors of the personality world, and their intelligence makes them incredibly good at spotting problems. whether in a relationship, a workplace, or even society at large. But here's the dark side. Once they see a problem, they often feel personally responsible for fixing it, even when it's far beyond their control. This tendency comes from their combination of empathy and foresight. They don't just notice suffering, they imagine the ripple effects of that suffering spreading into the future. If a friend is upset, they don't just hear the pain in their words. They picture how that unresolved pain could shape the person's choices for years to come. That vision makes it almost impossible for them to sit back and do nothing. The result is that INFJs carry emotional burdens that were never theirs to begin with. They step into roles of counselor, mediator, or even savior, often without being asked. At first, people admire this quality. Who wouldn't want a friend who cares so deeply? But over time, this pattern backfires. INFJs end up drained, resentful, and even invisible, because the focus is always on solving others' problems, never their own. Psychologists call this the empath's burden, a psychological trap where compassion turns into chronic overresponsibility. And INFJs, with their heightened intelligence, are especially prone to it. They see connections and solutions so clearly that they forget one crucial truth. Just because you can carry someone else's pain doesn't mean you should. The darkest irony is that the more INFJs try to save everyone else, the more disconnected they become from themselves. They risk burnout, identity loss, and deep emotional exhaustion. And in the end, many INFJs quietly suffer in silence, wondering why the world they've worked so hard to heal feels heavier than ever. This is the shadow side of their brilliance, a heart and mind powerful enough to care for the world, but fragile enough to be crushed by its weight. Fourthly, emotional detachment masquerading as wisdom. INFJs are often admired for their calm and composed nature, especially in emotional situations. When others are panicking, the INFJ stays cool, collected, and seemingly wise. But beneath that calm exterior lies a hidden dark side. What looks like wisdom to the outside world can actually be emotional detachment. Here's what happens. Because INFJs process emotions through both intuition and deep analysis, they often take a step back from the feeling itself and begin to intellectualize it. Instead of saying, "I feel hurt," they break it down into cause and effect. I feel this way because of their behavior, and it probably comes from this deeper insecurity. It's an incredible skill for understanding human psychology, but in relationships, it can make INFJs seem cold, almost robotic. Imagine pouring your heart out to someone and getting a careful, logical breakdown of your emotions instead of warmth or comfort. That's what many people experience with an INFJ. It's not that INFJs don't care. It's quite the opposite. They care so deeply that they retreat into analysis as a way to protect themselves from being overwhelmed. But this very strategy often backfires, leaving loved ones feeling dismissed, unseen, or even judged. From a psychological perspective, this is called emotional distancing, a defense mechanism, where people intellectualize feelings to avoid being consumed by them. For INFJs, their intelligence supercharges this habit. Instead of sitting with raw vulnerability, they climb into the safety of logic. It helps them feel in control, but it often damages their ability to form deeper bonds. And here's the paradox. INFJs long for intimacy and understanding more than almost any other type. Yet the very intelligence that helps them decode emotions becomes the wall that blocks them from fully experiencing connection. They appear wise, composed, even enlightened, but inside, they may be wrestling with loneliness, wondering why no one truly understands how much they care. This is the hidden cost of INFJ brilliance. What looks like emotional mastery is sometimes just a disguise for fear of being consumed, fear of being vulnerable, and fear of being hurt. And in protecting themselves, they often lose the closeness they crave most. Fifthly, high standards that alienate others. INFJs are visionaries. Their intelligence allows them to see not just what is, but what could be. They hold a picture of the ideal in their minds, an ideal relationship, an ideal friendship, even an ideal version of themselves. On the surface, that sounds inspiring. But here's the dark twist. Those high standards often end up alienating the very people they want to draw close. In relationships, INFJs might expect emotional depth, honesty, and growth that many people simply aren't ready to give. Friends or partners can feel constantly judged, like they're being measured against an invisible bar they never agreed to. And even when no one else is pressuring them, INFJs hold themselves to impossible expectations too. They want to be flawless, endlessly wise, and perfectly kind. When they inevitably fall short, they spiral into guilt and self-criticism. What makes this trait dangerous is that INFJs usually don't realize how intimidating their standards can be. To them, it's not about being harsh, it's about striving for what's possible. But to others, it can feel like walking into an exam you didn't study for. People may pull away, not because the INFJ doesn't care, but because being around them makes others feel inadequate. Psychologists call this the perfectionism paradox. High standards can drive excellence, but they also create isolation. For INFJs, their intelligence makes it worse because they can see so clearly how things should be. And once you've glimpsed perfection, it's hard to settle for anything less. The result is a cycle of disappointment. INFJs feel let down by others who don't meet their vision. Others feel judged or misunderstood, and slowly the INFJ retreats, wondering why it's so hard to find people who get it. Their brilliance, instead of bringing them closer to people, becomes a barrier. And this is the hidden tragedy. The INFJ's standards come from a place of love and hope. They believe in people's potential. That very belief, when pushed too far, often leaves them alone, staring at the gap between the ideal they see and the reality they have. And 6 on the list. Seeing patterns that others can't and won't. INFJs are natural pattern seekers. While most people see random events, INFJs see threads, hidden connections, repeating cycles, and subtle clues that others completely overlook. It's the kind of intelligence that makes them visionaries, able to anticipate problems long before they happen. But here's the dark side. When you see patterns that others don't, people don't usually call you wise. They call you paranoid, dramatic, or even delusional. Imagine warning a friend about their new relationship because you recognize familiar red flags. To you, it's obvious this person's behavior matches the same destructive pattern you've seen before. But instead of listening, your friend laughs it off or accuses you of being negative. And when things finally do fall apart, you're left with that bitter phrase every INFJ knows too well. I saw it coming. This ability can feel like both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it allows INFJs to protect themselves from bad decisions and guide others with uncanny accuracy. On the other hand, it leaves them isolated, carrying insights that no one else wants to hear. Because here's the truth. Not everyone wants to see the patterns. Sometimes people would rather stay blind than face uncomfortable truths. Psychologists describe this as pattern hyperdetection, where highly intuitive people identify connections, since social or emotional behavior that others dismiss. And while this trait often proves accurate, it can backfire socially. Instead of being appreciated, INFJs end up silenced, doubted, or even mocked. Over time, many INFJs learn to keep their insights to themselves, quietly watching others repeat mistakes they already predicted. And that silence is heavy, because knowing too much and being unable to share it can feel like carrying a secret burden. The INFJ mind doesn't just see the surface. It sees the ripple effects, the consequences, the future outcomes others are blind to. But instead of being celebrated, that vision often leaves them on the outside looking in, whispering truths no one is ready to hear. This is one of the cruelest backfires of INFJ intelligence. Their gift for pattern recognition doesn't bring them closer to people. It pushes them further away. Seventhly, the curse of being too self-aware. Most people go through life with a comfortable buffer of ignorance. Like they make mistakes, they move on, and they don't spend too much time analyzing every detail of who they are. INFJs, on the other hand, don't get that luxury. Their intelligence makes them hyper-self-aware, to the point where it often feels like living under a microscope that never switches off. An INFJ will replay conversations in their head, not once, not twice, but dozens of times, dissecting every word they said and every possible reaction it could have caused. They question their motives, their tone, even the look on their face, and it doesn't stop at social interactions. INFJs also analyze their dreams, their failures, their future decisions, everything. It's like being trapped in a hall of mirrors, surrounded by endless reflections of who they are, who they were, and who they might become. At first glance, this sounds like wisdom. After all, isn't self-awareness the key to growth? But for INFJs, the dark side is that the self-awareness never shuts off. It doesn't just help them improve, it turns into self-criticism, guilt, and even shame. Instead of feeling empowered by knowing themselves deeply, they often feel crushed by the weight of their own self-judgment. Psychologists sometimes call this rumination the constant cycle of overanalyzing yourself until you're drained of clarity and confidence. And INFJs, with their razor-sharp minds, are prime candidates for it. The irony is painful. The very intelligence that allows them to see their flaws clearly also convinces them those flaws are impossible to fix. The curse of being too self-aware is that INFJs rarely get to feel at peace with themselves. While others can shrug things off and move forward, INFJs carry their mistakes like scars etched into memory. They know themselves deeply, but that knowledge often feels like a burden, not a gift. This is one of the darkest backfires of INFJ intelligence. The more they see themselves clearly, the harder it becomes to love themselves fully. And eighthly, the loneliness of being misunderstood. INFJs often feel like they live in two worlds: the external world everyone else sees, and the inner world of insights, emotions, and patterns that few people ever access. Their intelligence gives them the ability to see life in layers, to peel back the surface and understand what's really happening underneath. But here's the tragedy. Most people around them don't share that same depth, and that gap creates a loneliness unlike any other. An INFJ might share a profound thought, a deep observation about life, or a painful truth they've uncovered. To them, it feels raw and meaningful. But instead of understanding, they're often met with blank stares, awkward silence, or even dismissal. Over time, they learn to keep their thoughts inside, not because they don't want to share, but because the effort of constantly explaining themselves feels exhausting. This loneliness isn't just about lacking company. It's about lacking resonance. It's the experience of speaking a language almost no one else can understand, even in a crowded room, even surrounded by friends. An INFJ can feel completely alone because the inner reality of who they are isn't being reflected back to them. Psychologists sometimes describe this as existential isolation, a deep sense that no one can ever fully know your inner world. For INFJs, their intelligence sharpens this isolation because they are so acutely aware of the distance between themselves and others. While others may settle for small talk and surface-level connection, INFJs crave something more, and when they don't find it, they feel like outsiders in their own lives. The cruel irony is that INFJs long for deep bonds more than most people. They want to be understood, to be seen, to be truly known. Yet their very brilliance, the thing that makes them special, often ensures that very few people can ever meet them at that level. And so, their intelligence, instead of connecting them to others, becomes the very thing that isolates them. This is the loneliness of being misunderstood, not just by strangers, but sometimes even by the people closest to them. Ninthly, turning intelligence against themselves. INFJs are known for their sharp minds, their ability to see hidden meanings, and their deep analytical skills. But here's the darkest twist of all. The very intelligence that helps them understand the world is often turned inward, weaponized against themselves. Instead of using their brilliance as a tool for growth, they unconsciously use it as a weapon of self-destruction. It usually starts with reflection. Something goes wrong. A conversation, a mistake at work, a failed relationship. Most people might feel upset for a while and then move on. But INFJs replay the moment again and again, dissecting every word, every gesture, every possibility of what they could have done differently. What begins as self-reflection quickly mutates into self-criticism and then into self-sabotage. Their minds don't stop at, "I made a mistake." They dig deeper, spiraling into "what's wrong with me?" or "why do I always do this?" Their intelligence gives them an endless supply of evidence against themselves, pulling from past failures, regrets, and insecurities to build a case that they're not good enough. And because INFJs are so good at connecting dots, they often convince themselves this case is airtight. Psychologists call this phenomenon negative rumination. It's when the brain becomes locked in, cycles of replaying and magnifying failures. And for INFJs, their intelligence intensifies the cycle because they're not just thinking about what happened, they're analyzing why it happened, what it means, and how it defines them. The result is often crushing self-doubt, anxiety, and even depression. The cruel irony is that INFJs would never treat anyone else this way. They offer compassion, understanding, and wisdom to others. But when it comes to themselves, their intelligence turns merciless. It's like being your own harshest critic and smartest enemy all at once. This is the ultimate backfire of INFJ brilliance. The ability to analyze so deeply becomes a trap, pulling them into battles with themselves that no one else even sees. And until they learn to direct their intelligence with kindness, the greatest threat to an INFJ isn't the outside world, it's the war waged inside their own mind. Last but not least, the dark gift when brilliance is a burden. INFJ intelligence is often seen as their greatest gift. It gives them vision, empathy, and the ability to see truths that others miss. But here's the paradox. The very thing that makes them extraordinary can also make their lives unbearably heavy. Their brilliance is not just a tool, it's a burden, one they carry in silence far more often than anyone realizes. To the outside world, an INFJ may appear calm, wise, and even gifted with an almost supernatural intuition. But beneath that exterior lies exhaustion. Every pattern they notice, every emotion they analyze, every problem they feel responsible for, it all piles up. And because they carry it so quietly, people rarely notice the toll it takes. The gift becomes invisible, while the burden grows heavier. This is why so many INFJs wrestle with the question, is my intelligence a blessing or a curse? On one hand, it allows them to help others, to offer insights, and to create meaningful change. On the other hand, it isolates them, overwhelms them, and often leaves them feeling like outsiders in their own story. The very thing that sets them apart is also what keeps them apart. Psychologists would say this is the double-edged sword of high sensitivity and intelligence. When combined, these traits create extraordinary awareness, but also extraordinary vulnerability. INFJs are constantly processing, constantly feeling, constantly aware of things most people never even notice. And while that awareness makes them brilliant, it also leaves them prone to burnout, loneliness, and self-doubt. The truth is, INFJ intelligence will always be both a gift and a shadow. It can light the way for others, but it can also darken their own path if left unchecked. The challenge isn't to dim their brilliance, but to learn how to carry it with compassion for others. Yes, but most importantly, for themselves. And maybe that's the real lesson here. The rarest minds are often the ones that feel the heaviest burdens. But in embracing both the gift and the curse, INFJs can turn their intelligence from a silent weight into a source of true power and purpose. If you found yourself nodding along to any of these dark sides of INFJ intelligence, you're definitely not alone. Share in the comments, which part hit you the hardest? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to give this video a like. It really helps more people find it. And don't forget to subscribe for more insights into personality, psychology, and the hidden sides of the mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.